For years, Prince Edward remained one of the quietest members of the royal family, rarely attracting headlines or becoming part of public controversy. While attention focused on other royals, he continued carrying out his duties without creating unnecessary drama. But behind the scenes, a disagreement was quietly taking shape that would eventually challenge long-held assumptions about royal authority. What appeared to be a routine review of royal property soon developed into a much larger question. How much power does a reigning monarch actually have over decisions made by a previous sovereign? As documents began to emerge, it became clear that this wasn't simply about a residence or a royal title. It was about promises that had been formally recorded years earlier. What followed revealed that careful planning, legal preparation, and written agreements could outweigh expectations inside the palace. Instead of a loud public confrontation, the dispute unfolded through official records, private discussions, and legal advice, leaving many surprised by the outcome and raising new questions about how the monarchy balances tradition, inheritance, and authority. The roots of this story stretch back to the final years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. During that period, she reportedly took deliberate steps to ensure certain family arrangements would remain secure after her passing. Among those decisions was her wish that the Duke of Edinburgh title should eventually pass to Prince Edward, honoring both Prince Philip's legacy and Edward's years of loyal service. When King Charles formally granted Edward the title in 2023, many believed the matter had been settled for good. However, the title represented more than ceremonial recognition. It carried deep historical significance and was closely connected to the Edinburgh household itself. Behind palace walls, discussions about royal finances, estate management, and modernization gradually created fresh questions about several royal properties. As those conversations continued, attention eventually turned toward Bagshot Park, transforming what seemed like an administrative matter into an issue with far greater constitutional and personal importance. Bagshot Park has long served as the official residence associated with the Duke of Edinburgh. Beyond its impressive size and historic architecture, the estate symbolizes continuity between generations of the royal family. Years before Edward inherited the title, the property required extensive restoration after decades of decline. Rather than leaving that responsibility to others, Edward invested significant private resources into bringing the estate back to proper condition. The restoration demanded years of planning, considerable financial commitment, and ongoing maintenance, eventually turning the neglected residence into a well-preserved royal home once again. Over time, those investments became central to Edward's position. From his perspective, the estate was not simply assigned for temporary use, it represented a long-term commitment supported by legal agreements and financial obligations that he had personally fulfilled. Those details would later become increasingly important as discussions surrounding the property's future intensified. As efforts to modernize parts of the monarchy continued, officials reportedly examined several royal residences to determine how they were managed and whether changes might be appropriate. Within those broader reviews, Bagshot Park attracted renewed attention. For Edward, however, the issue extended far beyond real estate. The residence had become inseparable from the responsibilities attached to his title and the commitments made over many years. More importantly, legal documents connected to the estate appeared to reinforce that relationship. Records relating to lease agreements, restoration expenses, and earlier decisions created a framework that could not easily be dismissed. Instead of relying on public statements or emotional arguments, Edward's approach focused on documented evidence that outlined both his responsibilities and his rights. As legal advisors carefully reviewed the available material, it became increasingly clear that any attempt to alter those arrangements would face significant legal obstacles. By the time formal legal opinions were sought, the dispute had evolved into something much larger than a disagreement over property management. At its heart was a fundamental question about continuity inside the monarchy itself. Could decisions made by one sovereign simply be reversed by the next, or did properly documented commitments continue to carry legal weight regardless of who occupied the throne? Edward's legal team assembled years of records, including lease agreements, financial documentation, and written evidence supporting the original arrangements surrounding Bagshot Park. Together, those materials presented a consistent picture of long-term obligations that had already been fulfilled. As the review progressed, it became increasingly difficult to treat the matter as a routine administrative change. Instead, it highlighted the importance of written agreements, careful planning, and legal certainty within one of the world's oldest constitutional institutions. What had begun quietly behind palace doors was now becoming one of the most closely watched internal royal disputes in recent years. As legal discussions continued, another issue unexpectedly entered the picture this time, involving Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. What initially appeared to be a routine review of royal jewelry soon became part of the wider debate over ownership and royal authority. Among the items receiving attention was the Enthymeion tiara, a piece closely associated with Sophie since her wedding in 1999. Unlike many ceremonial jewels that circulate among senior royals, this tiara had become a personal symbol throughout her years of public service. Questions reportedly emerged over whether certain historic pieces should be regarded as private gifts or remain within the broader royal collection. Although the review was presented as an administrative exercise, it quickly attracted greater significance because it touched on the distinction between personal property and institutional assets. For Edward and Sophie, the issue was about more than jewelry. It reflected a broader concern over whether decisions made years earlier by Queen Elizabeth II would continue to be respected or become subject to new interpretations under a different reign. What began as a technical review soon carried considerable emotional and constitutional weight. Edward's response once again centered on documentation rather than public disagreement. Legal advisors gathered records relating to the tiara's original presentation, examining whether it had been given as a private wedding gift or merely placed at Sophie's disposal for official occasions. Those distinctions carried enormous importance because they determined who ultimately held legal ownership. The supporting documents reportedly strengthened Edward's position, suggesting that the tiara had been intended as Sophie's personal possession rather than an item permanently controlled by the institution. From a broader perspective, the argument extended beyond a single piece of jewelry. If long-recognized personal gifts could later be reclassified, similar questions might arise regarding other gifts presented to members of the royal family over several decades. That possibility introduced uncertainty well beyond Edward and Sophie themselves. Consequently, what appeared to concern one treasured item gradually became a discussion about precedent, consistency, and the legal certainty surrounding personal gifts presented by a reigning monarch. As the situation developed, support reportedly began forming within different parts of the royal family. Princess Anne, known for her direct approach and unwavering respect for duty, was understood to share concerns about preserving commitments made by Queen Elizabeth II. Having witnessed the family's history over many decades, Anne appreciated the importance of maintaining confidence in official decisions made by previous monarchs. From her perspective, signed agreements and formal gifts represented more than personal arrangements. They reflected the credibility of the crown itself. If those commitments could easily be revisited, future royal decisions might also face unnecessary uncertainty. While Anne generally avoids public involvement in internal disputes, reports suggested she believed consistency and institutional stability were essential. Her position highlighted that the discussion was no longer simply about Edward or Sophie. It had become a wider question about protecting continuity within the monarchy and ensuring that carefully documented decisions retained their authority across successive reigns. Behind closed doors, legal experts carefully evaluated every relevant document connected to both Bagshot Park and the Enthymeion tiara. Lease agreements, financial records, correspondence, and historical paperwork were all examined to determine whether existing arrangements could legally be altered. As those reviews progressed, one conclusion reportedly became increasingly difficult to ignore. Edward's position rested not on personal expectations, but on documented commitments established over many years. His financial investment in restoring Bagshot Park, combined with formal agreements governing the estate, strengthened his legal standing considerably. At the same time, the records surrounding Sophie's wedding gift added further complexity to the jewelry dispute. Rather than relying on royal custom alone, the discussion increasingly focused on contract law, property rights, and documented intent. This shift transformed the disagreement into a matter where legal evidence carried greater weight than assumption, leaving far less room for administrative discretion than many had originally anticipated. As the review neared its conclusion, the atmosphere inside the palace reportedly became increasingly delicate. Officials understood that whatever decision emerged could influence future interpretations of royal property, inheritance, and personal gifts. Eventually, the legal advice appeared to favor maintaining the existing arrangements. Bagshot Park remained connected to Edward's position under the established agreements, while Sophie's continued possession of the Enthymeion tiara reflected the documentation supporting her ownership. Although the immediate disputes seemed to settle, the episode left a lasting impression within royal circles. It demonstrated that even inside one of the world's oldest institutions, carefully prepared legal records could shape outcomes more decisively than expectations or tradition alone. More importantly, it illustrated how questions involving family, legacy, and constitutional practice often become inseparable. While public appearances continued as normal, the events served as a reminder that behind every royal ceremony lies a complex framework of law, history, and carefully preserved agreements. Although the legal questions appeared to reach a conclusion, the broader impact inside the royal family was only beginning to emerge. The outcome reinforced an important principle. Written commitments made by a monarch do not simply disappear with the passing of time. Throughout the discussions, the focus gradually shifted away from personalities and toward institutional continuity. Officials recognized that reversing long-established arrangements without a strong legal basis could create uncertainty for future generations of the monarchy. For Prince Edward, the result represented more than protecting a residence or confirming ownership of personal property. It affirmed that years of responsibility, financial investment, and documented agreements still carried legal significance. For the palace, however, the episode highlighted how modernization must be balanced carefully against commitments already made. While the public saw little change in royal engagements or official appearances, those familiar with the situation understood that the discussions had quietly established an important precedent. The resolution demonstrated that tradition alone was not enough. Properly recorded agreements remained central to protecting stability within the institution and preserving confidence in decisions made across different reigns. As the immediate dispute faded from public attention, many observers began considering its long-term implications. Questions surrounding royal property, personal gifts, and inherited responsibilities are likely to continue as the monarchy evolves over time. This episode illustrated that such matters cannot be resolved through custom alone. Every agreement, lease, or official document may one day become significant if circumstances change. For Edward and Sophie, the experience reinforced the importance of preserving clear legal records supporting major family arrangements. Their reliance on documentation, rather than public confrontation, helped keep the disagreement largely within institutional channels, instead of turning it into an extended public controversy. At the same time, the discussions encouraged wider reflection on how constitutional traditions operate behind palace walls. Royal history is often presented through ceremonies and public events, but this situation reminded many that careful legal preparation frequently plays an equally important role in maintaining continuity, protecting established rights, and ensuring that previous decisions remain respected, regardless of changing leadership. The events also underscored Prince Edward's distinctive role within the modern royal family. Throughout his public life, he has generally avoided headline-making disputes, choosing instead to focus on long-term service and steady responsibilities. That approach appeared consistent during this situation as well. Rather than seeking public support or responding through media statements, his reported strategy centered on preparation, documentation, and legal process. The contrast between quiet persistence and public controversy became one of the defining features of the entire episode. Many royal observers noted that Edward's years of careful stewardship, particularly regarding Bagshot Park, strengthened his credibility throughout the discussions. Instead of relying on personal influence, he relied upon agreements already in place and obligations he had fulfilled over many years. Whether viewed as a legal victory or simply confirmation of existing arrangements, the outcome reflected a measured approach that prioritized stability over confrontation and evidence over emotion. Beyond the immediate family, the discussions offered a broader reminder about the relationship between history and law within constitutional monarchies. Royal traditions often appear timeless, yet many of those traditions are supported by carefully drafted documents that define responsibilities and ownership with remarkable precision. This episode illustrated how easily assumptions can be challenged once formal legal records are examined. It also demonstrated that succession does not automatically erase commitments made by previous sovereigns. Every reign builds upon the legal and constitutional foundations established before it. Maintaining public confidence, therefore, depends not only on ceremonial continuity, but also on respecting documented decisions that have already been implemented. In that sense, the story extended beyond individual family members and became part of a larger conversation about governance, accountability, and institutional consistency. Those principles remain essential to preserving stability within any long-standing constitutional institution, especially one as closely watched as the British monarchy. In the end, this story was never simply about a historic estate or an iconic piece of royal jewelry. It became a reminder that, within the monarchy, some of the most significant battles are fought quietly through paperwork, legal interpretation, and decisions made long before they attract public attention. Prince Edward's experience demonstrated how preparation, patience, and documented commitments can shape outcomes even inside one of the world's oldest royal institutions. While official engagements continue and public appearances project unity, the events surrounding Bagshot Park and the Anthemian tiara have already become part of the monarchy's modern history. They highlighted the lasting influence of Queen Elizabeth II's decisions, the importance of preserving legal certainty, and the complex balance between tradition and change. Whether future generations view this episode as a constitutional milestone or simply a family disagreement, one lesson remains clear: carefully recorded promises often carry far greater weight than assumptions, and the documents preserved today may determine the course of tomorrow's history.